The city glittered with light that wasn't quite natural anymore. Sky towers beamed advertisements directly into the eyes of anyone wearing ocular lenses, a constant shimmer of competing brands flickering against the horizon. Eleanor walked briskly through the entrance gates of the Marshall estate, her bare vision resisting the impulse to install the updates she kept swiping away. The gates scanned her face, confirmed her identity, and whispered a polite, "Welcome, Mrs. Eleanor Marshall," before sliding open with a hiss. The gala had already begun. She could hear the rising hum of voices, clinking glasses, the occasional sharp laugh that carried more performance than joy. Inside, the atrium was a cathedral of glass and steel, vines programmed to glow faintly green crawling up transparent walls. Holograms of family achievements hung in mid-air, Gerald's court victories rendered in gleaming silver, Ethan's supposed financial triumphs displayed in climbing graphs, Clara's latest endorsement deal pulsing with her own edited face, lips glossier than reality. The Marshall legacy floated around them like armor, a curated history visible at every angle. Eleanor smoothed her simple navy dress. It wasn't smart fabric, didn't shift with her mood, didn't shimmer under certain lighting. It was just fabric. She liked that, but she knew it looked plain in a sea of kinetic silks and programmable couture. Her husband, Michael, squeezed her hand. He wore the Marshall family cut, sharp lines, iridescent lapel, but his grip was warm, grounding. "You don't have to stay long," he murmured. "I'll stay as long as it takes," she replied, lips tugging into a calm smile. "Your father expects a show?" They stepped into the crowd. Immediately, faces turned. Eleanor felt the sweep of ocular scans, people measuring her in silent data points. Net worth, influence rating, media presence. She had none of the flashy scores. The numbers probably came back flat, unimpressive. To them, she was nearly invisible. And yet, as Gerald always reminded her, invisibility was unforgivable in a family like this. "Ah, there she is," Sylvia floated forward, the way only a woman who had rehearsed her life could. Sequins shifted across her gown, like a constellation realigning. Her lips curved in a smile that didn't touch her eyes. She kissed her son's cheek, then Eleanor's airspace. "Eleanor, darling, you've chosen understated tonight. Brave." Eleanor tilted her head, smile soft. "Sometimes it's refreshing not to compete with the holograms." Sylvia's blink was almost imperceptible. "Of course." She slid her arm through Michael's, effectively removing him from Elena's side. "Come, your father has been asking for you." Elena watched them disappear into the cluster of board members. Alone, she moved toward the long table where champagne drones hovered, refilling glasses without request. She reached for one and heard the familiar voice before she saw the familiar smirk. "Thought I smelled modest fabric," Ethan said. He was flanked by two acquaintances who looked like clones, same slick hair, same glassy laugh. His cufflinks broadcasted stock prices live, glowing red and green. "What's the non-profit princess drinking tonight? Sparkling water? Or is that too indulgent?" The acquaintances laughed. Ethan's grin widened. Eleanor swirled her champagne lazily. "Funny, I didn't realize bankruptcy came with accessories." One of the clones snorted into his drink. Ethan's jaw ticked, but he recovered quickly. "Cute. Still practicing that teacher tongue wit? Tell me, how's it going? Rescuing lost souls one coupon at a time?" Before she could respond, Clara joined, her perfume arriving half a second earlier than she did, sweet and suffocating. She leaned in, lips near Eleanor's ear, though her voice was loud enough for others to hear. "You know, some of us prefer to play in bigger leagues. I suppose every family needs a philanthropic ornament, though." Eleanor smiled politely, as though they'd complimented her earrings. Silence, wielded like a blade, often cut sharper than words. She raised her glass to them and drifted away. The dining hall doors opened. A ripple of anticipation moved through the crowd. Gerald Marshall, patriarch, entered like a judge about to deliver sentencing. His presence filled the room not because of volume, but because people bent around his orbit. His silver hair gleamed, his suit glowed faintly with coded pinstripes, his expression carved from stone. "Elena," he said when she approached to greet him. His voice carried enough weight that nearby conversations paused. He kissed her cheek, then held her at arm's length as though appraising a product. "You look good, though one wonders when you'll outgrow this resistance to presentation. Image, my dear, is survival." "And here I thought character was," she said lightly. Gerald chuckled, but there was no warmth. "Character doesn't close deals." They were called to the table. Seats were assigned, of course. Eleanor was positioned 3 chairs down from Michael, closer to the cousins than to her husband. Strategic, no doubt. To her left, Clara, who adjusted her bracelet so the embedded diamond screen flashed her follower count. To her right, an empty seat. For now. As the meal began, Gerald took the floor, delivering a toast about legacy, responsibility, the duty of marshals to uphold reputation in a world where reputation was currency. Eleanor tuned out the words, focusing instead on the texture of the evening, the clink of utensils against smart plates, the faint buzz of ocular feeds updating stats above each guest, the constant push-pull of subtle competition. Halfway through the second course, Gerald turned directly to her. "Tell me, Elena," he said, voice sharp enough to slice the duck on his plate, "do you ever wish for something bigger? Something that would actually keep my son in the lifestyle he deserves?" The table chuckled softly. Sylvia covered her mouth in performative shock. Ethan smirked, leaning back in his chair like a man basking in reflected cruelty. Clara's laugh was high, bright, satisfied. Eleanor lifted her glass, took a measured sip. She let the silence stretch just long enough. "That depends," she said finally. "Do you measure bigger by column inches or by the number of lives changed?" Gerald's smile tightened. The others tittered again, though less confidently. Ethan cut in, eager to reclaim momentum. "Well, I just closed a deal that netted me a 6-figure bonus. That's the kind of bigger we're talking about, isn't it, Dad?" "Exactly," Gerald affirmed. He looked at Elena with the patience of a man explaining arithmetic to a child. "Good men provide, good women support. Ambition is what elevates a family. Without it, you're nothing but—" He paused deliberately, then delivered the word like a verdict. "Trash." The room went still. The only sound was the faint buzz of the champagne drones. Eleanor's hand did not shake. She smiled softly, as if Gerald had commented on the weather. Her silence was mistaken, as always, for surrender. And then the empty chair beside her scraped back. A man slid into it, tall, shoulders easy under a tailored suit that seemed more relaxed than ceremonial. His tie was loose, his grin amused. He carried no visible data projections, no streaming reputation score, which made him an anomaly here. "Apologies for the delay," he said, voice smooth, almost playful. "Traffic in the sky lanes was unbearable." Gerald's expression shifted, briefly human. "Julian. Glad you could join us, Julian." The name hummed across the table, the family guest from abroad. He turned to Elena immediately, as though she were the most natural person to acknowledge. "And who might this be?" I wasn't told the marshals had hidden gems tucked away at their table. Clara's fork paused mid-air. Ethan's brow furrowed. Gerald cleared his throat. "This is my daughter-in-law, Eleanor." "Ah," Julian said, eyes warm, lingering a beat longer than politeness required. "The one I've heard so little about." Eleanor arched a brow. Perhaps there wasn't much to tell. "On the contrary," Julian said, lips curving, "I've found the people no one brags about are usually the most interesting." Something in his tone, half challenge, half flirtation, sent a ripple down the table. Clara's eyes rolled so hard Eleanor could almost hear them. Ethan barked a laugh. "Interesting. She runs a charity, donations, soup kitchens, heartwarming speeches. Not exactly headline material." Julian tilted his head, eyes still on Eleanor. Strange. Where I'm from, the ones with real power never brag about it. They let others talk until reality proves otherwise. The words hung in the air. Gerald shifted. Sylvia's smile stiffened. Eleanor set her glass down, turning her face to Julian with a soft, measured smile. "And what's more powerful," she asked, her voice steady but edged with something sharper, "than being underestimated?" The air in the room shifted, perceptible even through the hum of drones and the clink of smart plates. Clara's lips parted in disbelief. Gerald cleared his throat again, slower this time, as though to break the spell. But the damage, or the revelation, was already done. The dinner did not begin as a battle. It began as theatre. Gerald Marshall had always believed in presentation, and the dining room reflected his creed. Long walls of frosted smart glass shimmered with programmable light, now pulsing in warm gold. The ceiling projected a simulated twilight with hovering digital constellations, artificial but expensive, the kind of thing meant to make guests murmur in admiration. The tables stretched like a runway, wide enough to seat 20, though tonight there were only 10 of them, clustered as if they were actors on a stage play of wealth. Eleanor sat 2 seats from the head of the table, her posture collected, her hands folded loosely in her lap. The Marshall family always sat as if the air were laced with cameras, even when there weren't any. Status was an organism here, fed by every gesture, every word, every carefully chosen laugh. She could feel Gerald's eyes occasionally sweep toward her, not in curiosity, but in appraisal. He liked knowing who measured up and who fell short, as if life itself were a courtroom and everyone else was on trial. The opening courses were presented by service drones, sleek silver machines gliding silently to set down plates of molecular appetizers that glistened like jewels. Clara gasped delightedly at the plating, lifting her wrist so her holographic bracelet recorded a perfect snap for her followers. "Exquisite," she purred, though she hadn't tasted it yet. Ethan launched into numbers before the first glass of wine was half empty. He always did. "Q4 projections are clean. I've got a 6-figure bonus lined up, and we're already negotiating the next expansion into East Asia streams. The firm's betting big on algorithmic derivatives." He punctuated this with a grin that seemed practiced in boardroom mirrors. Sylvia sighed dreamily. "So ambitious, Ethan. A man who knows how to keep momentum, that's what keeps a family strong." Her gaze slid toward Elena, the compliment angled like a blade. Eleanor smiled faintly, neither rising to defend nor shrinking to submit. She knew better than to play their game too early. Julian, however, leaned back, swirling his glass, his gaze darting from one Marshall to the next. He had not been at last year's gathering, too busy negotiating trade partnerships across the Pacific, but his presence now was disruptive. Something about the way he let silence bloom after Ethan's brags, as if savouring the sound of hollowness, made the air taut. Gerald cleared his throat. "Ethan has done well, very well. That's what we need more of in this family, solid accomplishments that keep us visible." His hand tapped the stem of his glass, a subtle metronome of authority. Then, with a pivot sharp as a cross-examiner, he turned to Elena. "And you, Elena. Tell us, what's the current tally of your charity?" The word carried weight. Charity diminutive, frivolous. Eleanor lifted her eyes. The candles reflected in them, turning the brown into pools of copper. "We've placed 12 single mothers in full-time positions this quarter." Clara laughed softly, almost musically. 12. Oh, darling, that's practically a dinner party guest list. Sylvia's lips curved in that polite, poisonous smile. "It's lovely, dear." "Really, but I do worry sometimes. My son, your husband, he deserves stability. A woman who can secure the home front while he builds the empire. Don't you agree, Gerald?" Gerald's nod was slow, deliberate. "Of course. A Marshall must have strong pillars, not hobbies." The table chuckled, a chorus of social knives. Eleanor sat still, her expression neutral. But her pulse was a drumline beneath her calm. It was Julian who broke the rhythm. He leaned forward, elbows brushing the tablecloth in an act of casual defiance to the family's stiff posture. "So, Eleanor," he said, voice silky, "what exactly is it you do? I mean, beyond the polite summaries, I'd like to understand." The question silenced the table. It was genuine, but also deliberate. Julian's eyes held hers, and she recognized the spark. Not pity, not even defense, but provocation. An invitation. Eleanor exhaled slowly. "We connect single mothers with employers. We provide training, housing support when necessary. We have 20 staff now." She delivered it without flourish, without apology. Clara arched a brow. "Influence? Don't exaggerate, Eleanor. It's sweet, but let's not inflate." That was when Eleanor shifted. She placed her fork down with precise grace. "We secured a 2-year grant from the City Council last month. Several high-profile firms co-signed it. Some of Gerald's colleagues, actually." Her tone remained measured, but the effect was seismic. Gerald's glass paused halfway to his lips. Ethan's smirk faltered. Sylvia's smile twitched. Julian's grin widened as he tilted his head. "Wait." His voice cut smoothly through the silence. "You're the Elena they mention at the City Forum, the one running the workforce reintegration program. I've heard your name more than once." The silence became audible, a hum of shifting power. Gerald's jaw worked as if searching for words. Ethan rushed in, desperate. "Well, sure, that's community work." "Important in its way. But let's be clear, nothing beats real numbers. My new deal—" Julian interrupted smoothly, voice calm but sharpened like glass. "Impressive, though I'd say changing hundreds of lives beats stock charts any day." The words landed like a verdict. The table's attention pivoted, slowly but undeniably, toward Elena. Ethan chuckled awkwardly, tugging at his cuff. Clara sipped her wine too quickly, eyes narrowed. Sylvia dabbed her lips with a napkin, though they were spotless. Gerald stared into his glass as if it had betrayed him. Eleanor, for the first time that evening, allowed herself a smile, not triumphant, but serene, the kind that said she had nothing left to prove. Glasses were raised when the service drones delivered the next course, steam curling upward in aromatic ribbons. Julian lifted his in Elena's direction, eyes gleaming. "To the woman who hides her crown until the perfect moment." Heat rippled through her. She met his gaze, unflinching, and let her lips tilt in a sly curve. "Careful," she murmured. "Flattery has consequences." The exchange was light, but beneath it burned something electric. Clara's eyes flicked between them with barely concealed irritation. Sylvia shifted, posture stiffening, as if sensing the cracks in the family hierarchy widening with every passing glance. The night did not relax after that. It thickened, tension lacing every bite, every toast. But the axis had shifted, and Elena, once dismissed, now sat like a quiet storm at the center of it all. The dining room had grown warmer as the night stretched on, not just from the heated exchange, but from the subtle energy shifts that pulsed through the table like invisible currents. Gerald Marshall, once commanding at the head, sat red-faced, his napkin clutched a little too tightly. He cleared his throat with the air of a man preparing to seize back ground lost in an argument, though his voice betrayed a hint of strain. "Well," he said, gesturing vaguely with his glass, "perhaps we've underestimated your contributions, Eleanor." A brittle smile worked its way across his face. The words sounded like they had been dragged across gravel. Eleanor didn't flinch. She lifted her glass delicately, her nails catching the candlelight in pale glimmers. Her lips curved just enough to seem sweet, though her eyes gave away the sharper edge underneath. "It happens often," she said softly, "but underestimation can be useful." The line hovered, poised between pleasantry and warning. For a moment, silence pressed down like velvet. Then Julian chuckled, the sound low and rich, releasing the tension just enough. I like that, he said, raising his glass toward her. A strategy in disguise. A chorus of nervous laughter followed, though unevenly. Sylvia forced hers, the sound brittle as glass. Clara managed a tight smile, eyes sharp with irritation. Ethan merely shoved food around his plate, sulking in a storm of envy he could not disguise. Gerald tried to recover dignity with talk of market indices, but the air had already shifted. His words fell flat, each statistic deflating before it reached anyone's ears. Julian kept the table alive with a current of wit, but each quip returned, somehow, to Elena, spotlighting her, elevating her, as if he had deliberately appointed her the quiet queen of the night. When dessert came, an elaborate cascade of holographic sugarwork that collapsed into edible glitter, the applause felt hollow. The Marshall clan no longer applauded themselves, they were applauding survival. Eleanor savoured her spoonful, her calm demeanour a performance of its own. She hadn't raised her voice once, hadn't bragged, hadn't demanded attention, and yet all eyes slid back to her, again and again, unable to resist the gravity she had revealed. By the time the guests dispersed, coats collected and drones dismissed, Clara avoided eye contact entirely. Ethan barked too sharply at the valet drone, and Sylvia fluttered about with brittle charm, as if sheer performance could mend what had cracked. Julian lingered just long enough to catch Elena's eye across the foyer. He tilted his head slightly, the faintest of winks, a shared acknowledgement of the evening's theatre. And then he was gone, his absence almost louder than his presence had been. The Marshall residence was quiet by morning, but the silence was deceptive. The real noise came not from voices but from the family's network, an internal web of messages, posts, and private channels. In this near-future world, reputations weren't whispered about. They were coded into streams, archived and dissected by algorithms that weighed every emoji, every pause, every screenshot. Eleanor poured herself coffee in the pale morning light, her body still wrapped in a robe, hair loosely tied. The kitchen's smart counter lit up with notifications the moment she touched her mug to it. She usually ignored family channels until she had to, but today the pings came insistent, clustered, a pattern she recognized as trouble. The first message came from Clara, time-stamped just before dawn. Last night was humiliating. We cannot keep letting her make us look small. Eleanor smiled faintly, sipping her coffee. Clara had always needed an enemy to measure herself against. The irony, of course, was that Eleanor hadn't made her look small. Clara had done that herself, with every sneer and every brittle laugh. The second message blinked into view almost immediately, but this one came as a screenshot. Ethan, in his haste, had mistakenly forwarded it to the family thread instead of a private chat. It was from a creditor. Mr. Marshall, we require an immediate update on your outstanding balance. Delay will result in automatic seizure of non-essential assets. Please respond within 24 hours. The chat exploded. Sylvia fired off a frantic, "Ethan?" Gerald demanded clarification. Clara typed in all caps. But Ethan had gone silent. The digital slip was irreversible. His image, the wealthy, confident banker, cracked wide open for all of them to see. Eleanor took another sip of coffee, the warmth sliding down her throat. She hadn't lifted a finger, and yet the family's hierarchy was collapsing under its own weight. Then came the third message, private this time, addressed only to her. Gerald. Eleanor, I owe you an apology. You've accomplished more than I realized. Perhaps we could discuss ways I might help expand your work. My old network still has influence, and I see now that your efforts are worthy of it. The irony was almost too perfect. The man who had called her trash across a polished dinner table now typed words that sought her validation. She let the message sit unread for a few minutes, savouring the balance of power finally tipping in silence. When she replied, it was polite but clipped. I appreciate your message. Let's revisit the idea after I've reviewed my team's priorities. No exclamation marks, no warmth, just control. By late morning, the storm in the family channels had quieted to a low simmer. Sylvia posted a photo of orchids from her garden, pretending serenity. Clara uploaded a filtered selfie, tagged with an inspirational quote about resilience. Ethan remained silent, and Gerald posted nothing at all. Eleanor closed the feed and let the quiet return. Her husband, Daniel, padded into the kitchen, hair tousled, shirt half-buttoned. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her with a look that was equal parts admiration and awe. "You didn't just survive last night," he said finally. "You owned it." Elena arched a brow. "Did I? I thought I was just eating dessert." Daniel chuckled, crossing to her, his hand brushing her shoulder as he reached for his own mug. "Don't play coy. I saw Gerald choking on his own ego. I saw Clara's jaw lock so tight I thought her veneers would crack. And Julian," he shook his head, "he couldn't take his eyes off you." Her lips tilted into a sly smile. "Julian enjoys games. He stirs the pot just to see how people react. And you," Daniel said, setting down his mug and leaning close, "reacted like a queen. I swear, watching you last night." His voice dipped lower, intimate now. "I've never wanted to kiss you in public so badly." Eleanor's laugh was soft, teasing. "Then maybe next time, don't underestimate me either." Daniel's eyes darkened with that particular heat only she could ignite. He slid an arm around her waist, pulling her against him with deliberate slowness, as if savouring the reversal. "Point taken," he murmured. And then his mouth met hers, warm, playful, edged with the hunger of a man both chastened and enthralled. The kiss stretched, deepened, until Eleanor drew back with a faint smirk. "Careful," she whispered, echoing her words from the night before. "Flattery has consequences." Daniel grinned, breathless. "I'll take every one of them." The true victory was not Gerald's reluctant apology, nor Ethan's exposed debt, nor Clara's simmering resentment. It wasn't even the silent acknowledgement that the family had been rebalanced around her presence. The true victory was this: that Eleanor had not bent, not bowed, not bartered her integrity for acceptance. She had held her ground, played her cards with grace, and let the truth reveal itself without force. In a world where status could be bought, streamed, and manipulated into metrics, she had proven something rarer. That authenticity, loyalty, and quiet strength outlasted every hologram of wealth. And as Daniel kissed her again, deeper this time, Eleanor realized she didn't need to crush the family to win. She only needed to live her values so fully that even those who mocked her could no longer deny their power. The Marshalls would talk, they would spin, excuse, maneuver. But the memory of that dinner, the moment when the outsider turned the table without raising her voice, would linger. A legend in its own right, told and retold in the subtle language of glances, whispers, and reluctant respect. Elena smiled against her husband's lips, knowing one thing with crystalline clarity: she had rewritten the script. And no algorithm, no metric, no shallow hierarchy could take that away.